is up, everyone? This week, I'm going to be diving into my top 10 linebackers for Dynasty IDP Fantasy Football. Last week, we did a lot of the defensive linemen, mostly edge rushers, a couple of interior guys. This week, we are talking about what I believe should be the foundational piece of your IDP roster, the linebacker. None of these edge guys going at the quarterback, none of these corners or safeties dropping back. We are talking about the hard-hitting, hard-nosed, green dot-wearing linebackers, the guys that control the defensive game. I believe these guys are the foundational pieces because they have the highest floors for points, because most of the IDP leagues that I play in, at least, are guided by tackle numbers. And linebackers on most teams lead in tackles. So we're going to go over my favorite defensive position, and we're going to go into detail about why some of these guys are great dynasty assets, doing a top 10 list. The first two players on my list could probably be described not as 1 and 2, but 1A and 1B. My 1A, or my first player on my list, Roquan Smith of the Baltimore Ravens. There's no doubt that Roquan Smith is a unique linebacker. In this day and age, not a lot of teams go out and get a middle linebacker and then pay him big money. But that is exactly what the Ravens did when they acquired Roquan Smith a couple of years ago and built around him. And I believe it's working out to the point where they were actually comfortable letting Patrick Queen, another great IDP linebacker who we'll be talking about later, go to a division rival. Roquan Smith has probably the highest ceiling of any player on this list, and I believe that's because he has a consistent floor. When he has a consistent floor, it means you know that each week he is going to score an allotted amount of points, which is going to benefit your roster and benefit your team. But the ceiling plays are those big plays, sacks, interceptions, forced fumbles, even recoveries. Roquan Smith truly can do it all from the inside linebacker position, and that is why he is my 1A. He's a field general. He's a playmaker. He is everything that you want if you were building a modern-day linebacker in the NFL. And the Ravens have locked him up for the long term, and he is still a dynasty asset because he has still not hit the dreaded age of 30. So Roquan Smith is my number 1 linebacker. My second linebacker, my 1B to Roquan Smith, is linebacker Foye Oluokun of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Foye burst onto the scene as a kind of a random from the Atlanta Falcons and the inside linebacker position, and ever since that he's been on the field, I don't believe there's ever been a player with the highest floor. Foye is one of those guys, he is just going to tackle everything in sight. He's not going to have a lot of the other splash plays. He's going to have 2 or 3 sacks a year. His game is not predicated on the big plays, on interceptions or forced fumbles. He is strictly a tackling machine. But that is why I love him so much. You have to build your teams around consistency and then take chances on different players. But if you can get these guys with high floors, with capable ceilings, with high upside, you can win your leagues. Foye is not really going to do anything else. I can't mention that enough in this video. So if you're looking for these splashy, oh my gosh, pick six, forced fumble, fumble recovery, all that, that's just not your guy. But Foye has had 3 straight 100 solo tackle, not total tackle, solo tackle seasons in a row. These players don't grow on trees. And Foye Oluokun is almost a 1 of 1. But I just am more partial to Roquan Smith, which is the only reason that he is my number 2 linebacker. Number 3 is where I break away from the mold a little bit. I am partial to the Giants linebacker Bobby Okereke, not Bobby Okereke as Pat McAfee once said. Okereke proved to us that he can thrive on a second team. In fantasy football, one of the scariest things, especially in Dynasty, is investing capital into a player that has moved teams. When you're moving teams, you're moving into unfamiliar territory. It's like being the new guy at work or the new kid in school. It's not comfortable. How are you going to thrive in an environment where you are not used to? Okereke showed us that he is the same player, if not better, when he is the focal point. He left Indianapolis, where he was in the shadow of then named Darius Leonard, or Shaquille Leonard now, and he was constantly a mid-tier linebacker, linebacker 2, sometimes a linebacker 3, and even a 1 sometimes, but he was not the man. Since going to the Giants, he is now the man in the middle. Micah McFadden, I'm sorry, you're just not that guy. You are not that guy. And everyone else there is more of an edge rusher style of linebacker. So when you have Okereke in this defense, he is tackling everything in sight. My favorite part about Okereke, he is just 27 years old, and he has proven that he can do this at a high level now. And I don't believe he's going anywhere with the Giants, and he is especially not going anywhere when it comes to statistics. So you need to make sure that Bobby Okereke is higher on your list. I may have him high at 3. I don't believe consensus is that near, but we need to look at what we have in front of us, and that is a proven asset at a position that is critical for your team to win in an IDP Dynasty Football League. So ignore all the other fancy and flashy names. Ignore the other guys that may have the giant payday, by NFL standards, a better linebacker. Take Okereke and be happy that you have a guy like this who is going to give you that consistent floor with a decent amount of splash plays for the upside that we all love to chase in this game. Bobby Okereke comes in at number 3. Number 4 is probably the best NFL linebacker on this list, and that is the 49ers star Fred Warner. Fred Warner is worth every penny that the Niners paid him. All right, he is not flashy, but he is definitely that dude when he is on the field. He makes everything from pass deflections to sacks to big tackle numbers to forced fumbles, recoveries. He just happens to be everywhere. You can tell that the 49ers have built their defense around his strengths and have put him with complementary players that have excelled next to him. One of these players in particular was Dre Greenlaw, who we saw unfortunately get injured in one of the biggest games of the season last year. It was heartbreaking to see it, but such is life. That means that Fred Warner this year likely starts as the main man in the middle, as if he wasn't already. Greenlaw has a tendency to take up some of the statistics, and at times it makes Fred Warner seem as though he's not as good as he is. But because of the absence of Greenlaw and the 49ers' inability to get somebody else there that I believe is going to make a significant difference, I believe that we could see Fred Warner immediately out of the gate have a strong start to this upcoming season. Now, he's my number 4 in Dynasty because I still believe that he's just one of these guys that's not going to go away. He was paid a record amount of money. He broke the record that Roquan Smith had when he signed his contract for the Ravens. And I believe that you don't invest capital like that into a player unless you truly want to build around him and he is a milestone for your team. I believe that Fred Warner is going to be a 49er for life. I believe that you need to get on him now if you haven't already. Everybody knows his name, but as far as a dynasty asset, he's one of those guys you could likely acquire because the stats don't always match up with the hype. Fred Warner is one of my favorite backers in this class, and I believe he is going to start off hot, and because of the hot start, he is going to get you into playoff contention early, and that is always a key and a plus when playing dynasty football. Fred Warner is my number 4 linebacker. The 5th linebacker on my list may be one of those guys that only IDP managers know about, but I promise you, you know about him because he has these absurd statistical weeks, and that is TJ Edwards of the Chicago Bears. TJ Edwards is one of those guys where I just didn't believe, even though I saw it happen 2 straight seasons, I'm just not going to be fooled again. The guy is just fine on his second team. All right, I thought the numbers from the Philadelphia days were a little inflated. I thought these 13, 14, 15 tackle weeks that we always see, I was just like, all right, that's just not sustainable. You can't have these type of games. Well, he has proven that it very much is sustainable. I don't know why he isn't consistently on teams. I don't know why teams haven't paid him the money. I assume it's probably some sort of a coverage thing or a scheme issue. But the reality is, as an IDP player, he is must-have. He has had 3 straight finishes where he would be in the top 7 or 8, which I believe consistently makes you a linebacker 1, a high upside linebacker 1. And I don't think people understand that unless you're truly in IDP circles. If you're learning how to play this game, it's all about the tackles. And this guy probably does that at the best rate of anybody on this list, outside of maybe a Foye, who we talked about earlier with some of those ridiculous numbers. When you have a player going to second team, it's very, very easy to get those nerves, to get that understanding of how are they going to do this? How is he going to fit here, especially if he couldn't make it work there? A player like TJ Edwards going on a second team makes me even more nervous because he just didn't fit in right and nobody talked about him, so clearly something must be wrong, right? Not at all. The Chicago Bears needed people to fill the void of Roquan Smith. I know all you Jack Sanborn fans thought it was going to be him, but the reality is they had to have multiple people fill in for that one player. TJ Edwards was one of the first, and I believe he had one of the best runs at it, and I believe that's going to continue this year. He is my 5th ranked linebacker in Dynasty, but honestly, he has all of the upside to where he could be a top 2 to 3 player if he continues at this clip and gets a couple of breaks. And that is why TJ Edwards sits at number 5. 2 years ago, if you'd have told me that I had this player anywhere but first, I would have laughed in your face. But the reality is, things change, situations change, and players get hurt. Number 6 is the now Miami Dolphins linebacker, Jordan Brooks. Jordan Brooks, as a Seattle Seahawk, was the unquestioned linebacker 1 in Dynasty, maybe outside of Pete Werner from the New Orleans Saints, who we all saw kind of have this similar trajectory, which I'm going to get into. We have these young guys, and they splash early. And I believe that sometimes these players have not fully grown into what I would consider their NFL body, and they're playing against players and are being tasked to take down players that are just more muscular and more intense to start. Especially at the linebacker position, you are constantly hitting people. It is a car wreck on every play, especially a run play. And Jordan Brooks was playing alongside one of the greatest linebackers of all time in Bobby Wagner and still outperformed him statistically. Then he unfortunately tore his ACL late into the season of 2022. Last year, he started on week 1, which was kind of absurd considering the fact that he had tore his ACL, and I believe it was week 14 or 15. You can check that, but the reality is he should have been gone way longer than he was, but he wasn't. He was on a contract year, and he played through, I'm sure, which was an excruciating rehab to get back on the field, but unfortunately he did not stick with the Seattle Seahawks, and he will be with the Miami Dolphins. This makes me nervous. He came back probably too early. The Seattle Seahawks know more than we do, and he was a guy that they let go, as well as Bobby Wagner. And I believe that there's something to be said about that. Now, you can't ignore the fact that he was one of the best at the position just 2 years ago, and he is now going to be a full year removed from this injury, so he will have an uptick in potential playing time and potential energy. But he is just going to a team that's not really known to have dominant IDP linebackers. I believe that he's going to be one of these guys that we're constantly hopeful will get better, but he's probably too risky for me to personally put my chips in the middle on this player. But facts are facts. He's young. He's shown us in the past that he can be a dominant player, and I am not going to be fooled in keeping him off this list. He's just lower than I believe he should be, and I can't put him back there until he proves that I'm wrong. Jordan Brooks at linebacker 6. Number 7 on my list is the Chicago Bears linebacker Tremaine Edmunds. Earlier in this video, I talked about how TJ Edwards was brought in to help lighten the load from the loss of Roquan Smith. Tremaine Edmunds was also brought here to do this. Now, I believe that Edwards is probably more of the statistical freak that you're looking for in an IDP type of a roster, but what Tremaine Edmunds brings is a better football player in my mind. Now, football players versus IDP players to me can be separated by one thing. They can do all assets of the game, and they can put it all together, which will in turn give you stats and points in IDP. Chicago can support multiple linebackers in IDP formats. So if TJ Edwards is the tackle guy and Tremaine Edmunds is more of the coverage, get back, have some big plays type of guy, I am okay with that. I still believe he's young enough that he can be a star moving forward. He's going into his prime right now if he's not already in it. And he had some big years for the Buffalo Bills prior to coming to Chicago. So we know he can put it together once he gets comfortable, and I believe that one more year in this system and one more offseason will show us what he's capable of, and we will get back to some of those Tremaine Edmunds numbers of the past. He had an immediate impact coming in here, and in his career, he has never had less than 100 plus tackles on a season. So you know what you are getting with Tremaine Edmunds. You're getting a solid floor. You got a little bit of upside because he's still not that old, and you have him playing the more traditional linebacker spot. He's going to be in charge of more than just see ball, hit ball. Players like that are valuable, especially on dynasty rosters, which is why Tremaine Edmunds is in my top 10 at number 7. My number 8 player I need to issue a formal apology for. Logan Wilson of the Cincinnati Bengals. I am sorry. I doubted you all of last season. I went on any IDP show I could, and I crapped on your name, and I don't even know why. I am a huge Bengals fan. But I thought what the Bengals were doing last year was manipulating schemes, putting defensive backs in different positions, which were going to increase tackles. I thought with the additional pass rush, we were going to have a little bit of some different stuff, that the linebacker position wasn't going to be as productive as Logan Wilson proved that it was. He is an underrated dynasty asset, and I believe it's because the Bengals defense as a whole is not talked about in these elite tiers. But with defensive coordinator Lou, we are seeing some of these players hit levels that we have not seen as Bengals fans in quite some time. Everybody can point out to the big plays that we saw from like the Sam Hubbard in the game against the Baltimore Ravens, in the Sunday Miracle, in the playoff game. But can you tell me what Logan Wilson has done? Exactly. Logan Wilson is a 100-plus tackle guy that plays inside linebacker for a team that can thrive with inside linebackers. I know it's kind of cliche to say, well, hey, this team was good in the past, therefore this position will be good now. But the reality is we are dependent in this game on the statisticians at stadiums. And the Bengals have been able to support an inside linebacker for the better part of 15 years at a very high level. Back to the days of the infamous Vontaze Burfict. And the Bengals have had the same statistician for quite a while. You need to understand that this game is about solo tackles and assisted tackles. And the linebackers are going to have the most opportunity, and the solo tackles are always worth more. Logan Wilson is going to benefit from this, but he's also going to have these splash plays because he can play effective and dominating pass coverage for his position. Logan, I'm sorry, man. I'm a Bengals fan, and I was severely wrong about your fantasy football value, and I'm coming on here to tell you that this year I will not be fooled again. And that is why you are linebacker 8 on my IDP Dynasty Fantasy Football list. The 9th player on my list is the newly acquired Pittsburgh Steelers linebacker Patrick Queen. It is rare to see a player of his caliber on the market, and it's even more rare to see a player of his caliber go to a division rival. Patrick Queen left the Baltimore Ravens because I believe he was just being overshadowed by Roquan Smith. He has a very good statistical output, which benefits IDP managers. But there were reports last year that Patrick Queen wasn't exactly hitting the spots he was supposed to hit and wasn't doing schematically what the Ravens were looking for. I believe that's why he chose to walk. Roquan Smith obviously took up all the spotlight in the room, but Patrick Queen was a very good linebacker. I believe through weeks 1 through 4, he was actually in the top 3 of scoring for linebackers. Now, he's going to a Pittsburgh team that needs some star power on that defense. We have not seen a high-level Pittsburgh inside linebacker since the days of Ryan Shazier. We have seen a lot of patchwork type of players, a Cole Holcomb. We've seen people go in there and attempt to hit this, Alex Herbig, but we have not seen anybody do it. I believe Patrick Queen is that guy. The Steelers also are trying to fill this void with any means necessary. They drafted Peyton Wilson, who I believe will get some playing time, but he will not at the expense of Patrick Queen. Pittsburgh played a lot of players in this backfield last season, but I believe that this year they are going to foundationally build around what Patrick Queen does well, and that is splash plays that allow this defense to get after the quarterback and go for these big plays. Patrick Queen can and will be a player you can build around in Dynasty. He's probably as cheap as he'll ever be, considering the fact that he's now a new face in a familiar place for him. And we are going to see the Pittsburgh Steelers build around him because they just lack a star power you need on the defensive side of the ball. So I believe they picked up one of the best steals this offseason, and that is why Patrick Queen comes in at number 9. And lastly, my number 10 linebacker is Ernest Jones of the Los Angeles Rams. It's no secret that the Rams defense was built around Aaron Donald. And this season, with the loss of Donald, there is a lot of questions on how effective this team will be. My simple response to this is, you're never going to be able to fill the Donald void, so you have to build around players you know. Byron Young and Ernest Jones are two of these players that I believe are going to be focal points moving forward. The Rams spent a lot of draft capital on their defensive line, and rightfully so. But that means they also trust the people they have in the linebacker room, Ernest Jones being the most critical. He's not often talked about, but he's highly effective at what he does. The team has invested heavily into the pass rush. When a team invests in pass rushing and they want to get at the quarterback, this opens up opportunities for their receivers in the middle of the field, where the linebacker plays. So I believe because of the effective players that the Rams have put on the defensive line and the edge rushing, this will allow them to get after the quarterback and will open up receiving lanes for opposing teams, where Ernest Jones will be sitting and waiting to make the big plays we have seen him make in just the few seasons he's been around. My favorite part about him, he is 24 years old. The sky is the limit. He has likely not hit his prime, and we are going to see that journey this season. I believe the Rams need an identity, a new identity. And the fact is, they're going to go for fast, get the other quarterback down. So while the other teams and other players are going to make the headlines, Ernest Jones is going to sit quietly back there, wait, seek, and destroy the opposing team's players. Ernest Jones rounds out my list at number 10. So there you have it, guys. Thank you again for watching the video. That was my top 10 Dynasty linebackers. As always, if you need any sort of IDP video content, you gotta go to the RPO football page. But if you're looking for my written content, all of my articles are on footballguys.com. Thank you again for watching these videos. Please like, follow, subscribe, all the fancy things that you're supposed to do with these videos. And once again, I really appreciate you watching. Thank you all, and God bless.